What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Today we have Charles, aka what is it? You go by Chuck?
Chuck, I go by Chuck.
Chuck Fassi here. You've heard the name. We've been talking about him a little bit, and he is one of the first few recipients of Andrew Yang's Universal Basic Income. First, want to give you an opportunity, Charles, to go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody. And
Okay.
thank you for getting the call.
Chuck Fassi. I live up in Goffstown, New Hampshire. And technically, my wife is the first recipient, but he kind of chose us as a family. That's kind of what he told me. My wife's a little camera shy. She doesn't really like talking to the media, so I guess I was the one who kind of decided to tell our story.
Good deal. Good deal. Well, we appreciate you for doing that. I think you're going to be a great ambassador for the Universal Basic Income Program. And I kind of want to take everybody through your story. If we can go back to 2016, kind of where this all really started. Where were you at politically in 2016? Were you a Trump supporter? Were you a Hillary? Were you not engaged at all? Kind of take us through that.
I consider myself an independent-leaning kind of Democratic. And back in 2016, during the primaries, my wife and I, we both voted for Bernie. Come the election for the I believe, my wife voted for Hillary. I voted for Bernie. But obviously we both supported Hillary in the main election. But, we're pretty close ideologically. I would consider myself a little left of center. I'm somewhat politically active. I consider myself a Democrat more so today because of the current administration, but I would consider myself, probably in the middle of the road, independent.
Good deal. So how much attention were you paying to 2020? I mean, obviously Trump's been in office for a few years. You're in New Hampshire, one of those prime battleground states for the early voting. So were you paying attention to 2020 already, or were you just kind of waiting until we got further into it before all this happened?
I was definitely paying attention. I mean, I'm scared to death right now with this current administration. But I've been definitely paying quite a bit of attention to the point where I kind of kick in my anxiety. Kind of overwhelmed with how many Democratic candidates were originally running. I think we were up to like 23 candidates. We're following it pretty closely.
So now you say you were following it pretty closely, but you also mentioned that you weren't really familiar with Andrew Yang until your daughter introduced you. So who were you kind of leaning towards early on?
Yeah, when we first met Andrew, I think not too many people have declared their candidacy. I think, obviously Bernie did, Elizabeth Warren. So I in the very beginning, we were, I was torn between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie when, looking at who had declared their candidacy. But I didn't know who Andrew was, so I didn't even know he was really going to even be on the stage. So I wasn't really anticipating supporting him either. But I think it was probably, I kind of kept myself open in the beginning because I didn't want to kind of discredit Andrew. I didn't want to also say, I'm going to support the guy because we're receiving the Universal Basic Income. But so I didn't really commit to anybody, and know that I think it was fair to really commit to anybody. But the more I watched Andrew, and we went to a lot of his political events, and he was definitely hands off as far as telling us what we could and could not do with the money. I looked into his policies, and we saw him quite a bit on the campaign trail, and so I decided that I like his policies, and I like him as a person. He's just genuine. The guy is as genuine as you get. He's a guy that you got to see, kind of in operation, up front and personal. And anybody who goes sees the guy in a rally, they walk away, full-heartedly supporting the guy.
For sure. So what were your most important issues coming into this election? Was it, just defeating Trump? Were you a Medicare for All guy? What's your big issue? Or at least what was it?
Well, my biggest issue is and I've looked at it a little bit differently, being introduced to universal basic income. Because I was always, I like taking care of these kids, their student debt, having that wiped off, Medicare for all. I mean, I think the for-profit health insurance industry in this country is an atrocity. But I also understand that you can't just turn a switch and flip everybody over to Medicare overnight. So sometimes it's nice to kind of campaign on Medicare for all, but unless you're willing to say that we can't do it immediately and you're going to have to phase it in, then I think you're being disingenuous. But definitely my biggest issue is income disparity in this country, corporate control of our government as well as people's everyday lives. We have less and less competition in businesses nowadays, and everything is just so corporate. And Main Street is just being decimated. And that's one of the things that I never really looked at it as an automation issue, but I definitely felt like companies were trying to squeeze as much profit, out of their employees. And also, if it came to the point where, bottom line, it costs more to keep an employee in a position as opposed to replacing that person with a robot. And, if the spreadsheet says that it's cheaper for the robot, they're going to go for that. And, all these people that are kind of being left out in the cold, no income to buy the products that these corporations are making. That's the thing I don't understand is, people can't afford to buy your product. How do you stay in business?
Exactly. You got to make that connection at some point. That's definitely kind of where I was. It's like, okay, well, we don't make a lot, but then we need people to buy stuff, and we don't give them jobs, and they don't have income. So, yeah, that's going to be a problem. So, can you kind of just give us a quick rundown? Your daughter, she becomes familiar with Andrew Yang, and she kind of enters your name. Was it a drawing? How did you get put into a position where you guys were actually going to be receiving the UBI?
Yeah, so she went to the campaign event. She met Andrew, heard about universal basic income, so she actually sent him a couple of emails telling him about us and my situation with my job. So she just came home one day and said, hey, this Asian guy wants to come by and interview you. He's running for president, and he wants to give you $1,000 a month. So we were like, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to, I'll sit down and talk with the guy if he wants to give me some money. But I didn't know who he was. But after he was here for probably 3 to 4 hours. My wife made like turkey chili. It was like, we fed them, sat down at our kitchen table, and we just talked politics, and he was telling us about himself and why he was running for president. He really had no interest in running for president, but he wanted to introduce people to, universal basic income, because he saw that, when he was, it was funny because I actually watched Venture for America, the Operation Startup, the documentary about Venture for America. Because when I was out of a job, I was contemplating starting my own business, and I was interested in trying to learn about venture capitalists, and, it kind of piqued my interest that he was looking to provide money for low-income people or people, in parts of the country that could use some jobs. And so I was watching the video before I even knew who he was, which was kind of interesting. But that's, so he's sitting in our kitchen. We had a very good conversation, and it's just, he was, him and I were politically aligned. I mean, I believed everything that, he was kind of fighting for, and I liked the fact that he wasn't really in it to become president. He was really concerned about automation and how it's going to really affect people in their everyday lives, and everybody's fighting, for less and less resources because of scarcity, which is false. But and it just scares me, the way this country is moving towards giving so much power to corporations, and corporations having so much power over our lives. I mean, my last job, it was, I lost my job because I was fighting for my fellow employees, because, the company was forcing people to work 60, 70 hours a week, and they were classified as they were exempt from overtime, and so everybody was salary, and I was a manager, and it was like, salary and an exempt, it's, there is no limit to how many hours a company can make you work, and your only answer would be is if you don't like the hours, you have to quit. And that's not really a good option for a lot of people to say, if you don't like your job, you can just quit and find another one. It's not that easy. And to be working for a company where they were forcing their employees to work so many hours of overtime, uncompensated, by the way, it wasn't something that I was going to stand for. And being a manager, I was trying to work between, management and employees, keep everybody happy. But clearly the company wanted to go down a road of mistreating its employees for the bottom line. And that's kind of how I met my demise at the company, because that wasn't really appreciated.
Right.
So, that affected my thinking as well, as how much, power corporations have over people. And I did work for an independent, but he had aspirations to become a big corporation. So he wanted to, control his employees in a way that, if anybody steps out of line, they're just eliminated immediately.
Right.
Just
So let's go back to you guys have the conversation. Everything you agree to do it. You receive your first check, I guess, on it's New Year's Eve, 2019.
Yeah, we actually went down. He had a New Year's Eve party down in New York, and because we actually were going to be receiving the universal basic income, we figured, all right, we'll spend a little money and actually go to New York for the weekend and go to the New Year's Eve party he was throwing. We didn't realize he was going to give us a check, so he decided to give us a check right at midnight, which was kind of.
Yeah.
I guess it was a photo op.
Can't say no to that. Can't say no to the check. So, were you working at that time? It's January 1st, 2019. Are you working at that time, or are you still looking for a new job?
Yeah, when we actually got interviewed by Andrew, I actually was in the process of getting a job. It wasn't really a job that I wanted to take, but I kind of had no choice. So the job that I took was a substantial pay cut. I mean, I went from making $85,000 a year down to maybe 60. And with living in New Hampshire, it's a pretty expensive state to live in.
Yeah.
So it's between three people, it's enough. But yeah, it was definitely had to cut back quite a bit, because we didn't realize we weren't really expecting to get the universal basic income, especially where I was getting a job, and we weren't really ready to lose the house or anything like that. Right. But we were definitely financially struggling. And the way I lost my job, there was a period where I couldn't collect unemployment because I was forced to resign. And when you resign from your position, you can't collect unemployment. That was kind of a really scary time, where I was denied any income whatsoever. And that period, I actually wound up going into a hospital for a week for my mental health, and it wasn't a good experience, but it's definitely something that I needed. But the mental health system in this country is a totally different conversation, and I really like talking about it. But it was definitely something that it was a scary time. So actually getting universal basic income, getting the job, which I was grateful for, but also having to adjust it for the income loss. We haven't really gone much time without universal basic income. So I guess going forward, because we just received our last payment month of December. So basically January is our first month without getting it. So obviously, we got to cut back a little bit and rethink some of our purchases.
For sure.
But
I did want to kind of go back for just a second. Your daughter is the one who introduced you to Andrew Yang. Yes?
Yeah.
What was her role at that time? How did she become familiar with him? I mean, was it something she saw on the internet? Was it what drew her into Andrew Yang?
Well, when she was at the event, people were talking about him, told him that he was like an Asian version of Bernie. I think what drew her to him was our situation and his talk about universal basic income. That would be beneficial for us, especially the time, because, we were definitely in financial trouble at that particular point. So she was introduced because she was attracted to universal basic income. And then, like us, I mean, she didn't really know a lot about him.
Right.
And, we all kind of learned about his policies. So I think that's, UBI kind of introduced us to him. But then, obviously Andrew kind of kept us interested, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's interesting, because I never really made that connection. But given that you guys were former Bernie supporters, you would think logically you would just kind of go that route. But in that moment where there was urgency, that was when universal basic income became the most central thing. Because like, what can we do today to increase our situation, as opposed to, the potential of how things work out in an administration or a policy or a program. Asian Bernie, though, that's good. I like that. So you're working January, or you found a job now in January, right? You've received the first check? Okay. So you're working, and at that, you have the check. Have you decided going into this 12 months what you're going to do with the money, or are you just kind of waiting for it to come in and you'll figure it out from there?
Well, I think from like day one, because we had a little bit of money set aside for Janelle's tuition. We were trying to get some scholarships for her, but we knew that we had a pretty sizable tuition bill coming in. We didn't want to have we didn't want to have our daughter saddled with a ton of student debt. So right from the beginning, I knew that, Jodie, 90 to 100% of it was going to go towards Janelle's tuition.
One of the most common criticism you get with UBI is this idea that people are going to immediately take this money and go and be lazy, because that's secretly everyone's desire. They get 12 grand and they're done. And I just...
They try to live off of 12 grand.
Yeah, I just have to ask you, since I have you, was there no part of you that just wanted to call it a day and say, you know what, 12 grand, we're good? At least for a few months?
Actually, I was thinking about, okay, my wife, my daughter, the three of us. I particularly don't like my job. And if we actually, all three of us, got universal basic income and we were getting $36,000, I probably would have made a real effort to start my own business at that time. $12,000 isn't enough, but definitely made me think about, hey, I don't really have to work for somebody that I don't want to work for, especially if you have universal basic income coming in, because you're never really going to, because don't forget, there was a period where I lost my job, and because of the way I was let go, I could not collect unemployment, which means I had zero income coming in. I went from making almost $100,000 to making zero.
Wow.
And to think about, what happens in that period of, having no income, no money to buy food, no money to pay for health insurance, no money to pay the mortgage. And you can see somebody, even if they're considered upper middle class, being knocked into poverty overnight.
Yeah.
And it's a scary place to be. And it changed my mindset to think about, it's not just about me, it's about all these other people that are working in these jobs. I was listening to a story about somebody who drives for one of those meal services like Grubhub, or I don't get advertising, but the issue is that these people were living in their car, working for these food service, delivery services, literally making under minimum wage just so they can actually be able to eat and afford the car that they lived in. I mean, working 15, 17 hours a day to not even make enough money to afford a roof over your head is ridiculous. And I just think about somebody who even works for minimum wage, and you throw universal basic income on top of that.
What that would do.
You can actually have, you can start to live a little bit.
Yeah.
You can afford to buy groceries at the local grocery store instead of going to a 99-cent, meal at some, big franchise that's going to get you sick over time anyway.
For sure. So you mentioned that you were hospitalized shortly after leaving your prior employer. So at what point in your story, and there's that New Hampshire Public Radio, they did a story on you guys, which is the video we were talking about. At what point did you start to think about, now that you have this income coming in, that you can possibly start looking at different ways to address your own issues that you're not, currently able to, after taking that job, or that income loss?
Right. I mean, definitely, I didn't want Janelle to have a lot of debt either, but I was kind of like, all right, maybe if we can pay a little bit for her college. She has some student debt. It's like, I don't want her to have a ton of it, but, my wife is like, well, no, we don't want her to have any. And I'm like, all right, the wife is always right. Because I would have liked to put some money in the bank, but then it also made me realize that we were going to do this anyway, which means that as much as most of it went towards Janelle's college, it also, the mindset wasn't that we had to scrounge up every penny. We actually, we went out, we bought healthier food, we still went out to eat, we did things, and it was like being able to actually just, live in society. Because if we didn't have universal basic income, we probably would be, really struggling, but also not spending any money in the local economy. We would basically just be paying the bills and be lucky to have gas in the cars to get back and forth to work.
So, how did you become familiar with the improv classes that you decided to take as medicine? I mean, that's not something traditionally that would be considered as a normal treatment.
No, I kind of fell into it. It was interesting because, I definitely, I've been seeing a therapist since I was, probably 20 years old. So I'm very aware of my mental health, especially coming from a family that is riddled with it. I got a brother who passed away from complications of bipolar. I have a mother who passed away, lived the last 10 years of her life in a nursing home because of dementia, which was kind of attributed to her mental health. So I'm very mindful of my own mental health. And, my wife and I like to find things to do around town that don't cost us very much money. And we actually saw an improv show, and it was free. So we were like, okay, yeah, it's free, and we like improv. I just associated it with kind of stand-up comedy. I didn't really know much about it. I used to watch Whose Line Is It Anyway on the TV show, but on the TV, but I didn't really know a lot about improv. But it was a yoga teacher who actually, he teaches mindful improv. So it's a combination of mindfulness and improv. So it's not like just straight out improv. And he put on a little showcase with some of his students, and it was an intimate setting, and he actually encouraged people from the audience to kind of, join in. And I'm being an introvert, it wasn't something that I was really interested in doing. But because of the size of the class and how many people were there, I actually kind of got up and decided to kind of join in. And it was like a light switch in my head. It was like something, this is good for my mental health, and I need to continue doing this. And he actually, at the end of the show, he was saying that he was offering mindfulness improv classes. So that's kind of how I got into that. But I didn't realize that improv and mental health, that actually improv was actually created for therapy. And I didn't realize that.
No, I didn't realize that you were already. So you had been seeing somebody for your mental health up until then. This wasn't something that was recommended by your health care provider. It was just something you stumbled into.
No, I mean, I think about if I wasn't mindful of my mental health and actually going through this crisis, like where I would have landed, And it's like I'm very thankful that I've been on top of my own mental health. And obviously, when I lost my job, going to the hospital was my decision. I could have, God knows, did what when I got home. When I had just lost my job and had zero income, I probably would have taken my own life, But so it was difficult to make the decision to go to the hospital, but I knew it was necessary. But, you got people who live in denial of their own mental health. They wouldn't think about going to see a therapist or checking themselves in the hospital because of keep track of their mental state, because it's not, you just lost your job. You don't know what you're going to do when you get home. So yeah, it's seeing a therapist since my early 20s is probably what saved my life.
So let me ask you this: so how far into the UBI are you when you start taking the improv classes? Is that month 2, 3?
I probably want to say it was probably month 2.
Month 2. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was like last year. Yeah.
And you were talking about you were very familiar with Bernie Sanders' platform and his obviously tuition-free college. Why did you decide to reserve so much money towards the college expenses, college tuition?
Because I had gotten a job, so we did have some income coming in, and if I didn't have that job, Janelle would be right now acquiring quite a bit of student debt. So, obviously it would have been nice to put money in the bank, but, my wife kind of makes the financial decision. So most of it went towards Janelle's college. So I don't know what else to say. I mean,
For sure.
it freed up some money so we could actually spend some money, and that $10,000 that would have been taken out of the savings account, is still there because the UBI paid for the college. So, I mean, technically we did save.
Right.
And
what are your thoughts about Andrew Yang, the candidate at this point?
It's just, like I looked at Elizabeth Warren, and I looked at the she started a proposal about child care for everybody, and I was like, Janelle's in college, but you know what? When I was younger, and it would have been nice to have child care, but right now for somebody like me, a candidate saying I'm going to give everybody free child care, it doesn't do it, and it's like, I know that's being selfish,
right.
But I didn't get any tax credit when my daughter was in child care, when 15 years ago. So it's like, oh, it's nice, and it would have been nice to have it when I needed it, but I don't need it right now. So I felt like, and then I was thinking about like free college. It's like, then all the people who have already just paid off their student debt, what did they get? Other than angry because I paid off my loan, and I just made my last payment, and now President Warren is now giving everybody breaks on their college tuition and all the student debt, and it just gets eliminated. I mean, that just creates a lot of animosity. And I think universal basic income is just putting money in people's hands and then allowing them to make better decisions. It's not to say that we can't have programs that help pay for college. I think what kind of draws me to Andrew is just the thought about universal basic income and everybody across this country getting it, and just the immediate changes that it could do. I mean, it would revitalize downtown areas. It would allow people who travel many distances to work for a very low-paying job just because they have to, You're traveling, $7.25 is minimum wage, and you can't find a job that's less than 30 miles away from you. Now you have universal basic income. Are you going to drive an hour to go for a job that's paying you minimum wage, even if your car's able to make the distance? It's like, no, you're probably either going to find a job in your local community, or you'll find something closer to where you live.
Sure.
Because that money goes with you. You want to move to a part of the country that's probably a lot less expensive to live, and you can stretch that UBI, then that'll, people will have that opportunity to migrate to different parts of this country that could use some serious, migration of cash. These downtown areas and the southern areas that are desperate for, there's places that are giving out homes because they're abandoned. Just think about those places in this country. We have in New Hampshire, we have up in Berlin, New Hampshire, where we have these paper mills that closed. And people's tax rates are so high because, the federal government has been pushing down all the local costs to all the local communities. You have a house that's probably worth $15,000 in value, and you have an $8,000 tax bill.
Unbelievable.
Because the paper closed, there's no income up there, and and I just think about that. I was in Maine and walked into a downtown area, and it was like 2 out of every 3 businesses were empty.
Jeez.
So it's like, I was thinking about what people would actually have, because, there's a lot of money swirling around in the economy, but not much of it touches, the hands of average Americans. It's just huge transactions between huge corporations. That's where all that money is. Absolutely.
So I'm not familiar with your particular area in New Hampshire, but do you see any need, like in your immediate area, where UBI could be beneficial? Because even you pointing out, and that's one of the big issues, that there's a lot of these UBI experiments where we don't see how it would be really dispersed amongst an entire community. We're kind of see it go to a specific person who matches a specific profile, income level, or whatever. But you immediately noted that, well, that's just $12,000 for me. If it was true UBI, it would go to everybody in the family over 18. So it would be your daughter, you'd be your wife. So now you're getting 36 grand amongst 3 people. So in your community, what differences would you anticipate with UBI going across?
My last job, the one, even, when I was making good money, what I did like to do is I liked to spend that money in small independent businesses. you know. But I also realized that those places were more money to shop, you know. So then it was like, all right, you know, what if you really can't afford these prices? Because, you know, obviously a small business, you know, you can't compete with the Walmarts and the Home Depots, you know what I mean? So it's like, you know, now you have to choose between supporting a local business or actually having enough money for yourself. So now it's like, all right, you know what, I can go to Home Depot and, you know, I'll still have an extra $15 in my pocket that I can afford to feed my kids. So you're making some really rash decisions, you know, and you know, but not realizing that, okay, well, now you just, because you want to support your local business, they get a fold up shop, and then the 3, 4, 5 people that work there now are either on public assistance or God knows what they do, you know, trying to you know, because you have to take the level of income inequality in this country, and it's got to go hand in hand with the opioid crisis, with the higher suicide rates, with the higher mental health issues, because, you know, people are desperate. You know, and when you're desperate, you don't make good decisions. Living under stress, you don't make good decisions. You make bad financial decisions because you're in a bad financial situation. It's a cycle, you know, and people don't even think about like mental health and how it affects people's decisions. Happier people make better decisions, which makes you happy because now you got less crime, you get less drug addicts sleeping on the corner. It just makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. So when did you turn the corner as far as your position on Andrew? Because it seems like you kind of got into it. You were like, okay, well, we get a free check. We'll see how this goes. When was the moment when you started to notice differences in your life that wouldn't have come because of had you not received a UBI, and where you started to consider Andrew Yang as a legitimate candidate?
I think basically realizing that, you know, when we go to the store, that we didn't have to really, you know, buy the cheapest brand, the cheapest, and it was like, it was nice to be able to buy some fresh food, you know, fresh fruits and vegetables, and, you know, just also realizing that, you know, this, you know, the feeling, because we're actually able to pay for Janelle's college, we were able to also do that. So thinking about that, and sorry, I'm losing my train of thought.
No, you're good.
Yeah, and then thinking about Andrew and the fact that it's only 12 months and it's going to end, and it's like, all right, wouldn't it be nice if he was in office and, you know, this was permanent, but it also went to everybody else. It was like, that's when I really started thinking about looking at him as a serious candidate for me, you know, because one of the things is that he said that he just wanted to have the conversation about automation and universal basic income. He wasn't even contemplating really being a true contender for the nomination. But I mean, you have to admit now, looking at it, it's like, you know, he's got a real shot. He's not just some long shot candidate, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's the viability of his actual being able to get to the nomination. You got to think about that. But also the fact that, you know, he's such a genuine person. I don't care if he was polling 0. You know what? I would probably still vote for him just because I believe in the guy, you know?
Absolutely. So
you can't really have that, everybody telling you who's going to, you know, it's like, this is the best candidate. You should vote for this candidate. I'm going to vote for who I want. The last time I checked, you walked into that voting booth, you know, you're in there of your own free will. You can vote for whoever is on that ballot. And despite what anybody tells you outside, it's your decision.
Absolutely.
You know, so if you believe in a candidate, who cares what everybody else says? Just vote for who you believe is the best choice for the office, not the best chance. You know, it's only the primary too. It's like it's, you know, it's not even, you know, locked in right now. But let's not do the same thing we did in 2016.
For sure.
With the DNC Bernie.
Oh, that's a whole topic of discussion around here.
Yeah. It's like we're in this position, you know. I would prefer right now to be talking about, you know, a Sanders administration. Andrew would probably, you know, he would probably be somewhere in the cabinet doing something.
Yeah. So how have your thoughts about UBI changed from the beginning to now? I mean, I'm sure you had some reservations. You were, you know, not sure about it, but how have your thoughts changed over this last 12 months?
Well, I mean, I was always a guy who really kind of was frustrated with the income inequality, and it was like, all right, I feel like, you know, we're never, you know, in the short run, we're never really going to kind of relinquish a lot of this power that corporations have over our lives. And it's like, if we could get this passed, you know, even people that are on the right, Elon Musk is saying that this is going to be a necessity. This isn't something that, when people don't have money and they can't afford just the basics to survive, you're going to have some ugly scenes in this country. I mean, Andrew was talking about truckers being automated and self-driving trucks what do you think those truckers are going to do once they start rolling out these these self-driving trucks? They're already friggin', taking out the Tesla charging stations. They're already, having people who have trucks to block them so nobody can charge their cars. So they were already taking action because they know it's coming. But right now it's just, civil disobedience. But, if you have no job, no income, no prospects to be able to afford food, how desperate do you think people are going to get? What do you think is going to happen? Especially when you're trying to cut all these social services, food stamps, claiming that the unemployment rate is so great, but look at these jobs that they're creating. A $7.25-hour job is great. You eliminated, one position that probably, it's a mess.
Yeah.
I just get frustrated. It's just the greed in this country and the direction that we're moving because people are just so greedy. It just makes me very frustrated.
I hear you. So, can I ask you about your thoughts on Joe Biden? I'm always curious about Joe Biden's polling number seems to be doing well, but I really have trouble actually encountering people who support Joe Biden, but he is, I guess, perceived as I just
want to trash talk him, but I feel like a Biden nomination is going to be a deja vu all over again. You got an old white guy instead of an old white woman. The only reason why he's polling where he is right now is because of name recognition. But I'm sorry, Trump got elected because he was somebody who was claiming that he was going to do all these bold things. You know what I mean? So I don't understand why the Democrats think that having somebody who is talking about, well, we want to be moderate and we're going to take things very slow and one step. Why would they think somebody like that is going to win? When you saw Trump get in because he was so extreme. You know what I mean? I just don't get it. I don't know. I liked him when he was a vice president. I feel like my personal belief, he's more of a sidekick. He's not really kind of a headliner. I don't know. And I think, he's somebody who should be advising in the background. I don't think he should be somebody seeking the spotlight of the presidency of the United States.
Yeah. So you've seen a lot of candidates, I guess, come through New Hampshire, right? Is there anybody else who intrigues you outside of Andrew Yang?
Elizabeth Warren is probably, obviously she's from the state next door, but I mean, obviously in the Obama administration with her work on the Consumer Protection Agency, as much as it's been gutted, I mean, she fought for that. So she's doing things for the average person. You just look at her record, So, yeah, I've always liked Elizabeth Warren. I like Bernie. I think Bernie, right now, I don't think I would be able to support him. Obviously, if he gets the nomination, I'll vote for him. I'll be very happy. But I just think that, he's somebody else who should be in the background advising. He's got a lot of good ideas. He's got, things to offer, but I don't think he... I think, maybe the time for him has passed as well, just like Joe Biden. So
totally hear you.
I think, yeah, if I had to choose in the general election, I'm going to say I'll vote for any Democrat that gets the nomination, but you know what? I'm going to have to hold my nose to vote for Joe Biden, and I don't want to do that because that's going to give us a repeat. We're going to have friggin' Trump in 2020, and then it's like, well, we have to move to Canada.
Look, let me ask you. So, did you immediately notice the link between like automation and what Yang was talking about, or did it take you a while, or was it just over this past 12 months where you started really thinking about Yang's candidacy? Because one of the big disconnects that people have when I speak to them about Andrew Yang is automation. Oh, that's way in the future, or I don't really see how it's going to benefit. There'll just be new jobs. Like, what was it for you that made it click that this is going to be a lot bigger and faster than we really are considering right now?
It's printing industry back in the early to mid 90s. And I don't know if you know much about the printing industry, but they had these big presses, and so a lot of those jobs got automated away back in the 90s. So I actually had a job that went from manual to a computer, and my job was eliminated. I walked into my company, and there was this thing on the floor, and I was like, "What the hell is this?" Like, well, that's your replacement. You know what I mean? And so I kind of went through it back in the mid '90s, where my job was literally automated away. I wasn't thinking about it on a grand scale, but it was definitely something that was in the back of my mind of how quickly and how inhumanely that I was just replaced by a piece of equipment that now was made financial sense to eliminate my position, not caring what happened to me, so they can make a couple extra bucks in profit. So it's just the disconnect, between, if you don't know your employee's name, there's going to be a greater chance that you probably don't care what happens to them at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So, but when you heard Andrew Yang first say that, you probably didn't go right back to that moment in the 90s. You were probably still like, okay, well, I got a new job. I got into a new industry. Why not this time? Why not the next time? Or what was your initial thought on that?
Well, because I also, I like to hear them talk about retraining all this. And when I lost my job from automation, I mean, they did have some things in unemployment that you could actually get money for training, but it wasn't much. So it definitely made me feel like there was nothing in place for somebody who loses their job from automation. And for the government, it's like the retraining program, it just doesn't work. I mean, I got dyslexia. So for me to try to go back to school to learn how to code, or it's an impossibility for me, just because of the way I learn.
Yeah.
Not that I'm a stupid guy, I think I'm a pretty smart guy, but I learn differently. So the education system for somebody like myself it's not really financially feasible for me to try to spend that money for it's there's people who can do certain jobs. Right. Taking trade schools, investing in that stuff, I think is great, but there's a 60-year-old trucker who loses his job is not going to be able to go and retrain for probably any other job.
Right.
What are you going to do with those people? Especially where you're eliminating these jobs that are maybe meant for older or younger kids that don't require, I don't know, but you're not going to need all the labor because the labor is now going to be automated. So what are you going to do with these people who they can't do anything else? Are they supposed to just jump off a cliff?
Let's hope not. Well, let's hope not. It's not too late. We can still make some waves.
I imagine I didn't. Yeah, but obviously the suicide rate in this country is crazy. But when you say jump off the cliff, it's like, it's not. But no, I can get the correlation between it. But basically, that's what they're asking them to do.
So
how else are you supposed to take care of yourself?
For sure.
I got my wife's relatives that they lived out in Vegas. The husband lost his job. He was 70 years old, and they had nowhere to go, so we had to take him in. So if I lost my job, it's like now you get like 7 people on the street.
Wow. Wow. So what is your daughter's? She's what, 3rd year now?
Yeah. So she's a junior. So 3rd year. She's 21.
And is she involved in politics still, or she's just?
Well, she's going to school for communications and psychology. So she's because of me, she has a interest in mental health, and so she's also interning for AARP, but they're a non-political organization, so she has to kind of keep her social media and things pretty much in the middle of the road because of her internship. So she can't go around kind of campaigning for politicians or anything like that. But she's definitely left-leaning like we are. But for her social media presence and stuff like that, she can't be out there kind of advocating for Andrew or any other particular candidate.
Right. So, what are your plans now that this it's all over now? I guess the 12 months is up. You said you got your last check in December.
Yeah.
So, what are your plans? I know you guys talked about scaling back going forward.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to cut back quite a bit. Hopefully, be able to get the expenses down to the point where, we can at least stay, above water. I mean, I think we'll probably be able to, squeak by the skin of our teeth. But, we're definitely making some long-term thoughts and plans as far as probably downsizing, and, that'll probably help. But trying to figure out maybe a way to kind of supplement the income as well. So,
Yeah.
We'll see. We're not going to be on the street, but it's going to be, we're going to have to make some hard decisions about finances and what gets cut, and so we haven't really had that discussion yet, but we know it's coming.
Yeah. So what was your biggest takeaway, or biggest misconception? Let's say, what was your biggest misconception about UBI before and after?
The cry of it's socialism, and you're going to get lazy, and you're just going to sit back and collect money, and it's so untrue. I mean, obviously, I didn't think about quitting my job for the sake of staying home. If anything, I would want to quit my job so I can start my own business and work for myself. It has nothing to do with not wanting to do anything. Even if I wanted to go and volunteer my time somewhere, why isn't that better for society? Not everybody who gets a check is going to go home on the couch and play video games all day. People want to kind of live fulfilling lives, And I think that's one of the biggest things is it would give a lot of people some freedom to do that. With people who like creating art, making music, but they really can't do it full time because it doesn't pay the bills. So, they work at a job that, probably limits their creativity. How much more art and music would be in the world if people actually had the time to do it because that's what they wanted to do, But, we're the ones that place things in society and put a value on them. But I don't understand why we don't put more value on music and art. But you know what? I think this would get people who want to do it and to be fulfilled to create a lot more, and that would benefit society as a whole.
So the big takeaway from all of the conversations I've had regarding UBI is that switch of going from scarcity to abundance, and that being such a difficult concept for many people to wrap their heads around until you actually have that happen for you. Was there a particular moment for you when that happened, or what do you say to the skeptic who just doesn't see the difference? Because even you pointing out, just the mental differences between not having the UBI versus having it. What was that moment, or is there a moment?
I mean, I knew false scarcity is something that's kind of pushed for people who want to kind of maintain their advantage, their status, and this disparity between the rich and poor and corporations taking control. I look at it as it's mental manipulation. There's plenty of food, there's plenty of resources to go around. I mean, but what controls the resources? It's the person who has the most money gets to control the resources. So it's just a psychological game. I mean, I don't know if it's the human condition, but it's like everybody wants to maintain their privilege, their advantage. So they're always going to prevent you from getting something because they think that whatever you get is going to come from them. So I've always had that mindset. So I always look at it as it's more of a figuring out a way for people to realize that they have more power than they think, instead of being allowed to be divided and conquered, and now we have everything has to have a profit to it. I mean, does anything, I just don't understand why everything has to be so profit driven. I mean, your health has to be profit driven, why? Why can't we have a healthcare system that's driven on people's health and well-being, I don't get it. And eventually, if you play the game of, winner takes all for long, it's eventually, you have one person that has everything. It's and then it gets very ugly, very fast.
Well, we're definitely working on it for sure.
Yeah, we're making our way there. But it's going to come to a head. Hopefully it doesn't come to a head in violence, and that people can actually start thinking about universal basic income as something that it's not a magic wand to fix everything. But I don't think you're going to be able to really maintain civility in this country unless you do something like that. Training programs, free college. It doesn't help the average person who has zero prospects for a job and probably doesn't learn just like not everybody learns the same way, so they can't be trained, unless you're going to invest a ton more money in education in this country to try to, educate people who don't necessarily, like myself. What are you going to do with people who don't have the skills of the jobs that are available?
Right.
And then people who want to stay home and take care of their kids or their aging parents. How much money do we spend in this health system because people don't have time to take care of their own parents and they have to stick them in a nursing home because there isn't somebody home to take care of them? Anybody think about that cost? And then the cost of the person who actually gets stuck in the nursing home. It's like, people can age in place and families can stick together. They talk about the power of the family. Well, families are all dispersed trying to find a way to make a living instead of actually being families.
Is there anything else off of Andrew Yang's platform that kind of drew you, the more as you have had time to look into more of what he's offering, is there any other policy that you saw that really intrigued you or anything else that you particularly are interested in?
Well, yeah, I think that one of the things that kind of intrigued me was his talk about moving away from the measure of our economy strictly using GDP. Talking about measuring it to, our environment, people's happiness, our health, our well-being. I think just that alone, if you think about it, kind of moving away from the profit-driven, you can't run a government like a business. That's the thing that I don't understand why everybody thinks we need a business manual. Well, if you work for a company that has to make some drastic cuts, and you're on the freaking business end of those drastic cuts, you know what? You would hope that they, treat you like family instead of like a widget. So you can't run a business, you can't run a country like a business because businesses are heartless and they're only in business to make money. The government is of the people, for the people, by the people. We're the ones, the government is what regulates and makes the laws and the rules that we want, industry to follow. It's not, but we are supposed to be control of the government. Right now, corporations control the government. People don't like the government, well then be part of it. Run for your local office, be, in your own community, just pay attention. Because right now, it's everybody's running around trying to make a living, and the living that they're scrambling to make it's not even worth living.
That's perfect. I think that's a fantastic stopping point. I don't want to take up any more of your time. It took us a while to get this thing up and running. I just want to thank you for taking the time out to have this conversation with us. I don't know how active you want to be because the Yang Gang, if they know that you're interested, they're gonna.
I kind of yell at Andrew. It's like, I want to be out there. I want to be telling my story. I want to talk about mental health. That's one of the things that drew me to him is his willingness to talk about mental health.
Absolutely.
So I think we need, because mental health is mental health also leads to being able to be mentally manipulated. And people are being forced to watch one news source, and the narrative is being forced down their throat, and it's a problem.
Man, yes, thank you. Yeah, you're hitting the you're hitting the nail right on the head, man. Can we give everyone your social info? Do you want people to follow you on Twitter or your email, or how can we contact you?
Yes, they can follow me on Twitter. It's at Chuck Fassi. I'm on Facebook. Just type in Fassi, Fassi, you'll find me. There's a lot of videos that I've done. We've talked to a lot of media organizations, and so if you type in Yang Fassi, you'll find a lot of videos and stuff like that, a lot of some articles and some papers. So we've been trying to get the message out there.
Oh, well, yeah, thank you. Especially at this critical time, we really need more people to hear the story so they can understand that this is greater than a program or a check, man. This is a completely radical shift in the way people will think mentally going forward. And, just this small trial is only 12 months, but, Andrew Yang wants to make it permanent for life. So let's see if we can continue to make that happen.